This is a joint committee meeting of both the New York City Transit and the MTA bus committees today. Before we start, I'd like to know if there are any public speakers. We have 3 public speakers. The first one is Murray Bowden. Murray?
I'm wearing this T-shirt from Venice with the gondola on it to let you all know that public transportation in Venice is all by water. There are no cars. It works very well, and we need to emulate that. I'm waiting, Tom, because I want to thank you, and Carmine is not here today, for all of the changes you've been instigating, cleaning the tracks the way you do, and that whole system is forward-looking. And I wish everybody in the MTA family was as free about looking at new ways of doing things as you have been. I mean, I get up here and I talk about things that need to be changed a lot. The other side of that responsibility is acknowledging the excellent job and the new way you do things. It's different, and it does upset some people. Well, the number of people upset has to be because you've done things that haven't been done in 30 years. How do we begin to move that on into other things in other areas is a big problem I have. I wanted to talk about trains and why we use railroad cars that are as long as they are and making them shorter. And one of the things I talked about at Metro North was the train horns and the inability to stop doing it. What it appears is there are some federal regulations that are written for an era that's long gone. And somehow we have to figure out how to change those. Now, I'm not sure if, because this is a joint meeting, I get to talk 2 minutes for the bus and 2 minutes for the other. I guess not. Anyhow, thank you for doing such a good job.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. The next speaker is William Henderson.
Good morning. On behalf of the riders, I want to thank the MTA, New York City Transit, and the MTA bus operations for the package of service restoration that was released last week and is going to be discussed in this board cycle. We know that a lot of staff work went into this, and we appreciate the efforts of everyone who put so much time into coming up with a very thoughtful package. We do appreciate that. As well, I want to acknowledge Alan Capelli, Mitch Pally, who was here at the earlier meeting, and our rider reps for keeping the issue of service restoration before the public and before the board. They did a fantastic job making sure that everybody realized that these services did need to be restored. There's a number of noteworthy service restorations in the package. Many of them will have major impacts on the riders. The B39 bus comes to mind. People will once again be able to take bus service across the East River without going to Queens. Nothing against Queens, but if you're in Brooklyn, it's sort of a trek. The restoration of the end of the Q24. We're also very pleased with that you're looking at a number of new routes. We noted the new routes in Manhattan, extension of service in the Bronx to the Gateway Mall. These are all great. The extension, making permanent the extension of the G recognizes a reality where people are using that service and using it very, very vigorously. So this is a very good package. It's a good day for the riders. We didn't do everything we would like to see done. Obviously, with $29 million, you can't restore $90 million in cuts. But one thing I do want to note is that that even though we're celebrating these restorations, the reason they were necessary at all was funding. We We had, without the cuts in funding, $141 million in 2010 and $100 million the next year, these cuts wouldn't have been necessary. And we hope that our public officials and our elected officials who made these cuts will take that to heart the next time difficult budget decisions need to be made. Public transportation is an essential service, and it needs to be treated as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. The next speaker is Sunny Zhang.
Good morning, Mr. Prendergast. Good morning to the committee. While I understand there's a hectic and joyous mood today about these restorations, I come to speak about what's behind them, service guidelines. More than 10 months ago, I sent to New York City Transit a request under the Freedom of Information Act asking for service planning guidelines. A few days later, you sent me a letter and said that the estimated response date would be January 20th. That's 6 months ago. I sent another letter 2 months ago today, and nothing came to me. I know that these guidelines are controversial. I know that no one in the MTA wants them to be released. But the Freedom of Information Act asked them to be released. And as the people in the press know, the Freedom of Information Act can be troublesome at times. But please, release what is asked of you. And if you don't think they can be released, provide a reason justified under the law. I also want to bring up another issue involving transparency. Every few months, there comes before this committee a summary of schedule changes. We all know it's a very controversial item, but it would be even more controversial if those schedule changes were never even presented to the committee. That's what MTA bus riders face. Why, if New York City Transit riders and the community can see a list of the changes down to the minute in the committee materials, why can't MTA bus riders have the same? Why do they wait for the schedule to come out? And why do they get span changes more often than they get frequency changes? Why do certain routes, like the BM4, like the BXM11, get service when they cost so much? Or more service than they need? Why do some routes like the Q65 get too little service? Just because MTA Bus Company gets a city subsidy doesn't mean you should give it less priority or enforce the guidelines less. And please, treat the two companies the same. Release both change summary sheets. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last speaker. No, one more. Oh. One more. Okay. Sir, please state your name.
Sure. Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez, representing the 68th Assembly District.
Good morning, Assemblyman.
Good morning. I know that oftentimes public hearings are used to point out all the things that are wrong about the MTA and the investment strategy, but I think what brings me to this meeting is the fact that there's a substantial amount of investment, I think to the tune of $30 million happening across the 68th Assembly District in terms of investments across certainly new stations, and I just wanted to applaud you for looking at Upper Manhattan, East Harlem, and some of the areas that heavily rely on public transportation, including subway and bus service, and thank you for your continued investment in building up our stations, making them easier to access. Of course, all the work around the 2nd Avenue subway, which we all continue to look forward to, but also making sure that the day-to-day services that we rely on, the infrastructure that we all are committed to require and need for our daily lives continues to be maintained, built up, and improved upon wherever possible. And we know we've had restorations in terms of previous cuts along bus lines in our district, particularly the M7. So we're happy about those services, but also about the increased infrastructure investments. So as a representative for East Harlem and a member of the Assembly who has always been committed towards infrastructure in the MTA, it's an opportunity for me to say thank you and continue the good work in terms of the investment and the strategies that are happening in Upper Manhattan, but also for all the riders who require the services on the day-to-day basis. So we will continue our commitment to MTA and investment and the capital plan, and appreciate that you recognize our communities and make those investments, and will continue to do so moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
First off, we're going to call the meeting of the MTA Bus Operations to order. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the June MTA Bus Operations Committee meeting? Any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The minutes carry. And now a motion for the minutes of the June New York City Transit Committee meeting. Do I have a second? Second. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. 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 Okay. Are there any changes to the New York City Transit Committee work plan?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are there any changes to the MTA bus operations?
No,
work
they are
plan?
not.
No, they're not. Okay. Now I'd like to, at this point, turn it over to Peter Caffiero to discuss service changes. But before I do, I would like to state to one of the public speakers, our service guidelines are public documents and have been printed many, many times in public. I'll make sure you get a copy before you leave here today. And I apologize for any mishap regarding any letters that you sent. Peter?
Okay, thank you. We have 3 service change proposals to present this month to both the New York City Transit and MTA bus committees. The first and largest will be the Joint Agency Service Investment Package, which provides for bus service improvements as well as one rail improvement on various New York City Transit routes. We'll implement on 25 existing bus routes and 1 subway route, as well as create 5 new routes or service areas that I'll talk about. And we anticipate these will result in a net cost of $17.8 million annually. If we could get the presentation. Okay, next slide, please. So just to review some recent history, in 2010, obviously we had a significant budget gap of over $900 million. New York City Transit implemented service reductions that net saved about $70 million, a little less than $70 million annually in June of 2010 as part of the plan to stabilize the MTA finances. We tried as best we could within the parameters of saving a significant amount of money to preserve, to minimize the impact to our riders and preserve appropriate levels of subway and bus service where we continue to operate. Next. Since June of 2010, we've made service adjustments to a number of routes to address concerns that were raised by the public, as well as some unanticipated service issues. Most of these changes were cost neutral, except for ones where ridership and guidelines that were referred to before drove us, required us to add additional service. We restored some service in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, in Co-op City in the Eastern Bronx. We worked with the community to restore weekend service on the M50 in Midtown Manhattan by modifying the route in other underutilized areas. And we made minor adjustments on the bus and rail side, as I mentioned, to make sure we conform to loading guidelines. A year ago, the board asked us to review the impact of those service guidelines, and we presented a report, I believe last September, evaluating the 2010 service cuts and service changes. And what we found was generally our changes fell in 3 broad areas. The first area were changes where we ended up with a more efficient system. All of our riders, as far as we could see from ridership, shifted to other routes. Pretty much everyone was still able to travel. Ridership stayed the same, in some cases even increased. This is clearly the most desired outcome. It wasn't a huge number, but there were some significant areas where that was the case. The bulk of the routes and changes resulted in some decrease in ridership, a significant amount of shifting to other routes. Efficiency of the system in general increased. That was the most common outcome. The third group, the one that we were most concerned about, while we still saved the money from reducing the service, it was clear that these changes did not work so well. There were 2 parts to this. Either There were a few cases where you just couldn't get from point A to point B anymore. We were very open with this during the hearing process. One example is out in eastern Queens, the former Q79 route, which was one of our lowest ridership routes, but there really was no alternative to removing the route. The other types of changes, there were some alternatives, but our riders didn't switch to those alternatives for various reasons. So the routes lost significantly more ridership than we anticipated. Often cost efficiency of the surviving routes actually decreased, and clearly there were things that were not working. As we looked at the opportunity now to reinvest and restore some of the changes, clearly we looked at the third group of routes as the ones that we wanted to focus on. On the rail side, on the subway side, all of the changes ended up, the ridership continued to increase, and in some cases we ended up with some popular changes, including the M service to Midtown Manhattan. So for the most part, the rail service adjustments of 2 years ago were considered successful. In looking at what to do when this opportunity became available to us in the last month or two, we focused on the routes where the ridership and the cost efficiency had decreased, or where network coverage was lost. We, of course, went out to just reinvestigate, update our data, make sure we had current numbers to work with, and then we focused on getting as much as we could for the roughly $18 million available. Next. Largely, these came in 4 areas: weekend service restorations and additions. Weekend ridership in general has been growing, and weekend service was the focus of a significant number of the bus cuts because ridership is still less than it is on a weekday. But that resulted in some commercial areas, major commercial streets and shopping malls that had service on the weekday, but on the weekend when people were more likely to want to go there, or just as likely, there was no service. Network coverage, these were the cases, as I mentioned before, where we just broke the ability to get from one place to another by any mode. Service connections, again, the ones where the route was providing more utility than was apparent before, and we wanted to try to restore some of the links that had been broken that were attracting riders. And finally, the service to new markets that one of our several of the speakers mentioned. Where the city has continued to change, continued to grow, but we've not had the ability to invest in serving these potential significant new markets. On the weekends, I mentioned there were those commercial areas that we really felt we wanted to address. I won't go through all these, but to highlight the first one, the B2 is a route that connects the subway to Kings Plaza Shopping Mall in Brooklyn. It was not operating on weekends when a lot of people would want to go shopping. Next, some other examples of weekends. The BX34 on the left was our highest ridership weekend route that was discontinued. While there were other alternatives, there was a significant reduction in ridership on the weekends from this area, and so that's on our list to restore. The M21 is an example of Manhattan Crosstown, where we currently have no weekend crosstowns between 14th Street and Chambers Street. The M21 serves a growing area on a street that is well suited for bus operations, and we think has strong potential to grow, and is relatively evenly spaced between 14th and Chambers Street. Next. In terms of network coverage and restorations, I'll highlight a couple on the next slide, but on this one I just wanted to point out the X1 from Manhattan to Staten Island. This is a new investment. The X1s are the largest express route in the city. For the first time, we're proposing to have 24-hour service 7 days a week on this route to link Staten Island to Manhattan. The X1 currently runs till about 2 in the morning, and the late-night trips do carry a reasonable number of riders. We believe between shift workers and people going to Manhattan for all different reasons that there will be significant market for this. Next. As I mentioned earlier, the Q79 in eastern Queens was a route that, while low in ridership, was the only real north-south alternative in this area. There are east-west buses that connected to the subway, but no north-south alternative. After the service cuts, members of the community suggested perhaps linking the former Q79 to one of the existing east-west routes, and maybe that would be less expensive and more effective. We agreed with that suggestion, but it still cost money, which we didn't have at the time. Now that we do have some resources, rather than bring the Q79 back before as a route that served a niche market but didn't connect to other locations, we're proposing to restore service using the Q36 route so that service will be provided to connect with the subway in Jamaica and other commercial centers there. Alternate Q36 bus routes, buses will serve this route on weekdays. We're not going to restore Saturday service at this time. That was extremely low ridership on Saturdays. On the right, the X17 extension is a midday service to Tottenville. The extreme south of Staten Island doesn't have any express service except rush hours. That's a significant gap if someone's at work and needs to get home in the middle of the day, for example. We're proposing extending the X17 to provide the entire South Shore with weekday off-peak coverage. On service connectivity, there are a number of routes on this list. The B39 was mentioned by one of the speakers. I will highlight on the next 2 pages a few others. The S93 on the left is a route that goes to the front gate of the College of Staten Island. It connects that to Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, as well as intermediate points in Staten Island. It's been a reasonably successful bus route since it was implemented about 10 years ago, but students still have to either walk about a mile into the campus to where they're actually going or transfer to a college shuttle bus, which requires an additional walk between the bus stops. So we will, presuming we get the agreement with the college, we will extend the S93 into the center of the college. On the right, the B57 in Red Hook. Red Hook had some service adjustments that combined 2 bus routes, but which actually gave Red Hook riders more options to get to different places, but there still are both perceptions and real issues in terms of linking Red Hook to the subways and the rest of Brooklyn. So in this case, we're taking the B57 route. This is another change that was suggested by the public during the last 2 years, and extending that into Red Hook, past the Red Hook houses, and ending at the IKEA. Finally, the G train, which has been extended to Church Avenue for the last 3 years or so, but our funding, that was related to a capital project which will be completed in the spring of next year. We're proposing to continue permanently keeping the G at Church Avenue, which was the original terminal. This was actually cut back in a 1975 budget crisis service cut, but we'll be restoring it and continuing it at what is a much better terminal and also provides better connectivity between the G and other routes. Finally, the new services. We focused on serving schools, shopping centers, and economic centers throughout the city that we're developing, have developed, or are in the process of developing. I'll highlight each of them separately. Next. First, the BX13 in the Bronx will be extended south on River Avenue, passing the Gateway Center Mall, a major shopping complex that currently is a long walk from either subways or bus routes. This route is particularly important for employees at the mall, as well as people going to shop there. In Hunts Point in the Bronx, there is an existing bus route, the BX6, which goes on the eastern side of the peninsula and ends at the Hunts Point Market. But the western part of the peninsula is about as far within our city as you can be from any bus or subway route. The Barretto Point Park has had issues in terms of getting to the pool there in the summer, but there is development occurring throughout the peninsula, and we believe that a bus route here connecting to the subways and other bus routes would be an important addition. The Spring Creek area, which is highlighted in red, is a neighborhood in southeast Brooklyn. that is rapidly developing with high-density housing as well as row houses. There's some bus service on the periphery, but a bus that connects the number 3 train at New Lots Avenue into the area would be important. All the routes that I'm talking about right now, you see very fuzzy dotted lines to colored in areas. That's because we anticipate working closely with the community over the next few months to really define what streets the buses should run on and what they connect to, and then these would be subject to public hearings, probably, unless it was a minor extension of an existing route. They would be subject to public hearings and coming back to for board approval before implementation. The next one is the Navy Yard, Dumbo, and Vinegar Hill, which together with downtown Brooklyn are coming together now as something called the Tech Triangle. While there is bus service to the periphery of all these neighborhoods, the connections between them and into Vinegar Hill and back to the subways could be improved, and so we will work with both the community and the institutions to either look at an extension of an existing route or some other option to serve this area and provide the growing service to the growing employment there. A little north of the Navy Yard along the waterfront in Williamsburg and Greenpoint, there's been significant development with more continuing and anticipated. We would look again to both existing routes and/or a new route along the waterfront that would access this area and work with the community as to exactly which streets it could operate on. On the west side of Manhattan, the final route, this is an area where Manhattan clearly has a lot of bus service, and in 2010, in the center of Midtown, we reduced a lot of duplication of bus service. But on the far west side, there's no northbound bus service west of 9th Avenue. Excuse me, no southbound west of 9th Avenue, and nothing west of 10th Avenue in an area that's rapidly growing. So for people living on the far west area and wanting to travel down to the convention center or to Chelsea Piers or any of those destinations as they grow, there's really no alternatives at the moment. So we would look to implement a starter bus service that hopefully can be expanded as the neighborhood grows. In terms of timing on these routes, 4 routes that were relatively simple to restore weekend service on and that serve shopping areas will be implemented in the fall of 2012, in early October. 21 routes will be implemented in January 2013 as part of our regular employee pick service changes. The 5 new routes and new service areas we anticipate being implemented in the late spring, summer, or fall of 2013 as we work with the communities to define those routes and have public hearings on those alternatives. And lastly, the G train extension, which is operating now, will continue when the project is completed in 2013. This route will require a public hearing because it's greater than 25% of the route, but we anticipate it'll be a pretty popular change. That concludes the presentation on those changes. I have 2 additional changes to talk about. Our second proposed adjustment is to convert 3 bus routes, New York City Transit bus routes, or 4 depending on how you count, from standard buses to articulated buses. Those routes are the M34 SBS, the 34A SBS on 34th Street in Manhattan, the M60 between Harlem and Astoria and LaGuardia Airport, and the Q44 bus from Jamaica to Flushing into the Bronx. All of these routes are heavily used, frequent bus routes that are ideal for being more efficiently operated with articulated buses. Our policy on replacement is we do make during rush hours some adjustments. We replace 3 articulateds for every 4 standard buses. It still ends up with a net 10% increase on the route in terms of capacity, which will handle the growing ridership while operating more efficiently. During off-peak hours and overnight, in late hours, we replace 1 for 1, so there's even additional increase in capacity. These articulated bus routes will allow us to provide the service more efficiently and have a net savings of $4.6 million annually, which has been incorporated in our budget estimate for next year. The last item is an MTA bus service change. The Q113 local service in Far Rockaway. To improve southbound service reliability, the revision aligns the route with the northbound service. Currently, the southbound route travels on a narrow street named Yoke Street before getting back to the existing route, and this would consolidate both directions on the same streets through the Central Business District in Far Rockaway, which actually serves more people. I would be happy to answer any questions on any of these changes.
Yes, Mr. Merdler.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to congratulate and thank President Prendergast and his colleagues for the restorations and investments that he has made, particularly those on Bronx 34 and the work on the 149th Street station. I thank you on behalf of the people in the Bronx, and as I know, and you know, Borough President Ferrer has long worked for the Bronx 13 and the Hunts Point issues, and I thank you for listening to his pleas made long and actively. I would like to call your attention, if I may, to two matters. City Council Member Vaca has communicated with you, albeit belatedly, with respect to an extension of the Bronx 21 because of problems that arise there. May I ask that at an early date you take a good hard look at that. It makes a fairly compelling case, albeit it does impose at the same time financial consequences. The second thing is a question with respect to the articulated buses on 34th Street. Why is there a wait time increase?
During the rush hours, there's these articulated buses carry significantly more people than the local buses. So if we were replacing capacity one for one, we would actually require fewer buses and therefore less cost to serve the same number of riders. As I mentioned, we don't actually replace exactly the capacity one for one. There is about a net 10% increase in capacity, but during peak hours, there may be an additional minute or two of wait time between buses.
Yes, Mr. Albert.
I'd like to echo Chuck's congratulations to everyone involved in restoring this much-needed service. Obviously, we all didn't get everything we would like, but that's the way of the world, and we're very grateful for this, and as I'm sure riders will be. One item on the conversion to RTICs of these four routes. The M60 in the book here is slated as saying between LaGuardia and Morningside Heights. It's actually to the Upper West Side, and that brings me to the point. Has anyone looked at the layover possibilities for RTICs on West 106th Street, which is where they current, and in front of Strauss Park, which is where the current M60s lay over?
I'll let Peter answer the question, but I believe we've got an ongoing dialogue with New York City DOT on taking a look at the entire route from both terminuses and also the routing itself. Termini.
Termini.
Yeah, that's correct. I apologize. Stand corrected. And Peter, do you want to elaborate on that?
You're correct, Andrew, that the RTICs, we do need to look at all the bus stops. The Q44 is actually going to be implemented in September, in October, with those other changes I mentioned, and so that's the one we've been focusing on first. But we will look at every bus stop and every terminal, work with DOT, and make sure that they all function properly.
Thank you.
We actually have operated RTICs on this bus route on occasion before, and it's definitely, with the growing ridership to the airport and with luggage and everything else, it will be a definite advantage to go on this route.
Yeah, I was also going to ask about the certain amenities that are on the existing M60s. Would they be carried over to the RTICs?
Yeah, we intend to do that, Andrew.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Mr. Capelli.
I'd like to make a comment, but first I'm going to move the service. Don't we need a motion on this? No, we don't.
No, we do not.
Then without a motion, First of all, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to everybody here, both staff, Tom and Darrell, for their cooperation and consistent guidance and support, and over a very difficult period of time in getting us to this point. And to the board members who, quite frankly, took this issue very seriously and very responsibly. Hindsight is 20/20, but as I look back now, this was as good of a process in getting to this point as it really could have been. And I know I'm reminded of a conversation or of a debate that took place in December, and Jonathan Balin was concerned about some issues, I believe rightly so, at the December meeting, and wanted to see how that played out. And thanks to Governor Cuomo, who quite frankly resolved those issues in a means that was satisfactory to Jonathan and to everybody else, we got to a point where, consistent with good sound management practices, a friend in Albany and the governor who made whole on his commitments to mass transit, for bringing us a chairman that, quite frankly, gets it. And the only word who sent, I believe, shockwaves through the public, the people who showed up at our hearings. Joe wasn't at those hearings, but quite frankly, he met the spirit of the people who pled to us during those terrible service cut hearings, and put us in a place where we need to be. As Joe has mentioned, as the Daily News editorial mentioned, we're not out of the woods. We still have very perilous times ahead of us, but this was a process by which I think we can all be proud that we behaved prudently, put ourselves in a good place to move forward, and demonstrated to the public that we have been listening, that our first goal is to the riders and to our customers, and I think that really speaks well of this board. I think it speaks well of our chairman in his first 6 months in office, that he, the word I kept thinking about in the last couple of days is with a jolt. He's really shown New Yorkers that he gets it. So I'm going to call him Joltin' Joe from now on, as somebody who puts the riders first, and I thank you all for getting us to this point. So, Joe, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. But I do have to tell you that without the staff work, without Tom, without Darrell, without Peter Caffiero, and many, many others here at the MTA, the Transit Authority, and all the various different operating agencies, this would not have happened. They truly get it, and I really want to applaud all of them for all the work that they have done to get to this point, and more to come. Thank you. At this point, if there are no further questions or comments, I'm going to hand the gavel back over to Chairman LeBeau to continue the Transit Committee.
Thank you, Mr. MTA Chairman. And I'm going to pass the ball immediately to New York City Transit Authority President Tom Prendergast, and I'll bet you he's going to tell you at least 3 important things. One, subway ridership last month was at its highest level in about 50 years. And for those of you who are working 50 years ago, you'll remember that we all worked part of Saturday or all of Saturday, so that's quite an improvement. Second of all, that when the fare went to $1.50 in 1996, in constant 1996 dollars, the average non-student fare today is $1.07, which is quite remarkable, folks. And the third thing is, I bet she's going to tell us that Fast Track, the innovative way to repair our nearly 100-year-old system, or more than 100-year-old system, is doing actually fabulously. Chairman Loda has said it's the highest subway ridership in exactly 52 years. I apologize. Over to you, Tom. No, you don't have to give a report.
I'll redact that from my remarks. Subway performance indicators will be presented today by John Gall. Carmen Bianco is under the weather. John, Chief Transportation Officer.
Good morning, everybody. Subway performance results for the month of May and the 12-month average, where appropriate, are as follows. The 12-month rolling average for system-wide Subway weekday weight assessment was 79.3% in May 2012, which is up 0.9 of a percentage point from the 78.4% in May of 2011. Terminal on-time performance for May 2012 was as follows. System-wide weekday on-time performance was 83.7%, a decrease of 1.4 percentage points from the 85.1% in May of 11. System-wide weekend on-time performance was 90% even, a decrease of 0.3 of a percentage point from the 90.3% in May 2011. Improvement in number 7 line on-time performance and weight assessment continued compared to May 2011, and that's mainly due to the comprehensive track and signal rehabilitation work that's going on in the Steinway tube. Weekend on-time performance on the IRT was down 3.2 percentage points in May of 12. Routine system maintenance, in addition to several significant incidents occurring on 6 different weekend days during the month, did negatively affect service on the 2, 3, and 6 lines in particular. MDBF decreased in the month of May. At 174,824 miles, it was down 26% from the exceptionally high 236,322 in May of last year. The 12-month average was 164,772, down 5.5% from the 174,330 miles for the preceding 12 months. The modest dip in the 12-month average is one that we are looking at and monitoring very closely. Mr. Bianco did want to mention the overall high performance of the subway air conditioning systems during the recent heat waves. We monitor closely AC system performance on a daily basis and have been running about 98% so far this summer. So we'd like to compliment the car equipment maintenance team for that performance. Moving on to key performance indicators, system-wide service KPI was 82.5%, down 0.4% from the 82.9 in May of last year. System-wide passenger environment survey KPI was 90.9%, down 0.5 percentage point from the 91.4 in May of 2011. And for the Staten Island Railway service KPI is not reported, but SIR's PES KPI was 88.9%, up 2.9 from the 86% in May of last year. And finally, we concluded our 8th installment of Fast Track on Friday, June 15th on the Lexington Avenue line between Grand Central and Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. Our next Fast Track program begins tonight on the 6th Avenue line. Pardon? Yeah.
Cheryl Kennedy, safety report.
Tom?
I'm sorry.
May I?
Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Murler.
I don't mean to cast a damp effect upon the celebratory atmosphere, but I have a question which is not intended to deprecate all that you have done. If you look at page 4.6 and the following pages, you will find that on the number 2, 4, 5, A train, E train, and F train, and to a lesser extent on the number 3, we are encountering approximately 75%, or 3/4 of the performance standard that we would want. In other words, 25% of the time we're not doing it. My first question is, to what extent, if any, does signal problems, the old signals that we have in the system, impact or cause this? And number 2, is there any realistic basis for belief that we can get above 80%, let's say, or 90% as a standard?
On the weight assessment?
Yep.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how far into that, it's arguable, but I mean, definitely we could approach that. And what people will tell you, especially on a subway system more than a commuter rail system, the weight assessment of the regularity of service is far more important to them than the actual arriving time of any specific interval. Could you respond to the first question, John, in terms of signals is probably one of our major categories of delays system-wide because of the nature of the signal system. But in this particular case, could you add anything to that, John?
Yeah. In particular on the weight assessment?
Yes.
We have over the last couple of years, in particular, deliberately relaxed some of the constraints that had been imposed on allowing maintenance work to be performed, particularly weekdays during the middle of the day. And I think that is one of the reasons we have seen some increase in delays to allow this necessary work to be accomplished. But at the same time, as an organization, we have been focusing an awful lot more attention over the last year or so on regulating the service to assure the provision of evenly spaced and evenly loaded trains to the extent that we can. And the new weight assessment indicator is giving us some very useful feedback in this regard.
Well, my concern, if I may, just for one more point, is the following. If you look at the weekday terminal on-time performance, and again, people standing on a platform don't care what time you're going to get to the terminal, shows that the numbers on the numbers 2, 3, and 4 are about 60%, in one case 71%. My question really is, what is it you need in order to get it there? If economics were not a problem, what is it you need so that people standing on the platform can get that service in timely fashion and you can get the people in? Is it the signals? Is it doing more work at night and less in the daytime? What is it?
Actually, what we're saying, when we move to weight assessment and put weight assessment in its prominent place, we're saying regularity of service takes precedence over terminal on-time performance in a subway system. Agreed. I don't believe we want to abandon terminal on-time performance, but certainly we've made conscious decisions. And when you look at 25% out of headway, 50% out of headway, and greater than that, a train 25% out of headway is nowhere near as impactful as a 50% train out of headway or larger than that. So we're making conscious decisions to let some delays occur affecting on-time performance to try to put as many of the trains into that under 25% category. That's the logic behind it.
I'm not understanding a point. You're trying to minimize the headway gap?
I'll try to explain it this way. If a train is on a 2-minute headway,
okay,
and so a train arrives every 2 minutes, if a train arrives a minute late and there's a 3-minute headway, it's picking up another minute's worth of passengers at each individual station, and it becomes later and later. So when you measure the difference between a 25% difference on a 2-minute headway is 30 seconds. So you try to keep your trains less than 30 seconds late at their scheduled times along the line because that train is less crowded, it's less likely to get delayed more, and so you're managing to a lower percentage of increase over headway. That's what weight assessment is.
But you're also delaying the car behind you, are you not?
Not necessarily, no. But in terms of trying to, in some cases, you're making decisions to lay a number of trains so you have that regularity. One of the worst things to do is to have, if you're running a 2-minute headway, have a 4 or 5 minute delay between trains. It's very hard to smooth that out. And so that's why you try to manage to a headway tolerance in those percentages. Yeah, I'd like to meet with you. We could show you actually with a model, and you'll see very clearly with a model sometimes what we can explain it to you.
I just have one piece. Would you at some point take a look at what it is you need, maybe in pipe dream form, what it is you need and would want to improve the subway service? I think it would be instructive to the legislature. I think it would be instructive to the second floor, and I think it'd be instructive to City Hall.
Well, what we do right now with wayside block signaling is put station timing in and allow trains to get much and much closer to one another as they approach stations to try to increase throughput, the number of trains in a given hour. When we move to communication-based train control, that actually is an integral part of it. So the move to communication-based train control will do an awful lot to increase throughput and have better schedule regularity.
Thank you.
One thing, Chuck, implicit, I think, in your comment, because you said if holding economics aside,
Yep.
Economics are a major portion of this. But even if we had all the money, the running a system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, which is what we as New Yorkers want and demand, makes it even more difficult to make all of these changes. In a perfect world, we'd like to be able to fix it over a weekend. That's not possible. I mean, given the miles that we have and the amount of track that we have.
Joe, you and your colleagues have done a significant public service in trying to improve service and restore service. My issue is, and my purpose in this question, or series of questions, was to show those in legislative responsibilities and elsewhere the kind of things that we need in order to do the job they want us to do, that they press you to do, and that they scream when they don't get exactly what they want. And I think they need to know that they share that responsibility in every sense of the word.
I agree, but I will tell you I have, in the 6 months I've been here, never received a letter from anyone about on-time performance on the subway system. I have received on litter. I have received on various other different portions of it, but never on on-time performance.
All right, on to safety. Cheryl Kennedy, we have more or less accidents.
Before we leave transit, can I just ask a quick question for Tom or John? I noticed that you have 7 on causes of fires in the system. 17 are due to debris. Have we correlated where these are and in relation to the fast track program? If the fast track program is obviously meant to cut down on between station debris on the tracks and everything, have we correlated where these are and if this has occurred anywhere where there has been recently a fast track program?
We did that. System Safety took
You
a look
did
at
that?
that, yeah. And we did find that there were less fires in the areas of fast track, but you also have to look at how many days after fast track that
Right.
you're looking at. So yes, there were less. I can get you
Significantly less?
significantly less, yeah.
We generate on a daily basis quite a bit of trash. It's brought in and we try to get it removed. We do an awful lot of bulk removal during fast tracks, but they're once a quarter. So to Cheryl's point, once 2 or 3 weeks go after a fast track, you may have a large accumulation of trash in a given location.
Well, I'm glad you're doing the 6th Avenue line starting tonight, because every time I go to 34th Street on the express tracks, there is an unbelievable amount of litter there, maybe because it's a big shopping area, whatever. And it shouldn't have to wait for fast track, obviously, to take care of that, which is once every quarter or what have you. I mean, you're going to have a fire there. It's unbelievable at 34th Street on the 6th Avenue line.
There are many locations where we have a large accumulation, and you're right, we have to stay on top of it on a daily basis.
And Andrew, we are also monitoring very closely the impacts of fast track from a service quality standpoint, the number of incidents and delays in those corridors. It's still a little bit too early to draw any conclusions, but we're continuing to monitor it.
Do we have any data with respect to debris from those stations where the garbage cans were removed?
We owe this committee a report because we have to take a decision as to whether we're going to expand that pilot, and we expect to do that in probably the next meeting in September.
All right, after 2 false starts,
Okay.
Cheryl Kennedy on lesser accidents.
Safety results were as follows. The subway customer accident rate decreased by 14.9% for the 12-month period. In the month of April, the accident rate decreased by 9.8%, moving to 2.76 per million subway customers from a rate of 3.06 in April last year. The employee lost time accident rate increased by 1.6% for the month of May 2012 versus May 2011. The rolling 12-month rate was 3.31, a decrease of 0.6% from 3.33 over the previous 12-month period. There were 50 confirmed fires for the month of May, down 51% from the previous year. Additionally, fires decreased over the last 12 months by 16.3%. 98% of all fires were categorized as being low or average in severity for the month of May.
Questions for Cheryl? All right, Chief Joe Fox, I don't think you're going to do as well as Cheryl did.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. During the month of June, there were 230 major felonies committed within our transit system, an increase of 7% compared to June 2011. In June 2012, there were 23 fewer grand larcenies, while there were 22 more robberies than in June 2011. An average of 7.7 major felonies per day were committed during June 2012 compared to 7.2 per day in June 2011. So far this year, 31% of the Transit Bureau's crime occurred in Manhattan, 39% in Brooklyn, 13% in Queens, and 17% in the Bronx. As I have stated at every meeting before this committee, the rise in this type of crime is being driven by handheld electronic device theft. The Transit Bureau is combating this trend by continuing to step up uniform presence inside the subway system. As I reported during the last board meeting, we were about to begin three new multi-bureau crime prevention operations, where police officers normally assigned outside the transit system help patrol the subways. Every weekday, a team of transit crime prevention officers and crime prevention officers from outside transit report to a different borough. There, these officers spend an entire shift inside various subway stations within the borough, distributing crime prevention information materials to passengers. Also, every Friday evening, transit auxiliary police officers are joined by auxiliary police officers normally assigned to street patrol to conduct patrol in various subway stations throughout the city and distribute crime prevention material. It's essential that we continue to communicate to the public that these thefts of electronics are often preventable. The department continues to include a significant transit component to our Patrol Service Bureau Operation Impact Program. Officers throughout the city who are not assigned to transit are consistently conducting regular transit visits, increasing uniform presence in our subways. These programs are yielding results. We have recently seen a drop in major felonies in the 28-day period from June 18th, which is around when we started these three initiatives, through July 15th. Major felony crime dropped 4.9%. Members of our community are seeing an increased uniform presence throughout the subway system, which is making a direct impact on crime. Commanding officers continue to use team-led enforcement operations to target and combat crime. For example, during the week of June 18th through June 24th, Transit Bureau officers effected 1,154 arrests and made 4,074 enforcement contacts as part of our Operation Toolbox, one of our initiatives where we use all resources available. Team-led enforcement is proving to be one of our most valuable crime-fighting tools, and will continue to use them and get positive results. In addition to team-led enforcement, the Transit Bureau is making a note of crime trends and allocating its resources in order to best combat them. In January this year, the Bureau noticed a trend in the Bronx where a large number of its weekend crime occurred on trains during the late night, early morning hours. In order to address this trend, a program was created where one police officer is deployed on every train in the Bronx from midnight to 6 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. The officer then requests that the train conductor announce his or her presence on the train to alert all passengers and potential wrongdoers that police assistance is there and readily available. The officer then moves car to car as the train travels through the borough. Seeing the success of this program, we expanded it to Queens on the 7 and the A lines. Since the inception of the program in Queens, there have been no major felonies on the 7 or A lines during the covered time frame. In the Bronx, there have been only 6 major felonies on the 2, 4, and 6 lines, and no crimes in the D and 5 lines during the early weekend hours. This strategy has proven to be effective and will be continued. This month, the Transit Bureau was supplied with a major boost that will help us carry out these operations. 108 police officers were assigned to the Transit Bureau directly from the Police Academy. Every one of these police officers is assigned to our Bureau's Impact Program, where they actively enforce the law and add to our uniform presence in the subway. These officers are already making a positive impact on crime. Since their deployment on July 9th, 91% of the new officers, which is 98 of the 108, have made at least one arrest, including every new officer assigned to the Bronx and Queens. Collectively, these 108 officers have made 170 arrests. They are a welcome addition to our team, and they give us more flexibility in how we allocate our resources. They should also help us combat a problem that I have brought up in previous meetings, crimes against sleeping passengers. These types of crimes accounted for 27.8% of our grand larcenies in the subway system during the month of June. Transit police officers continue to actively combat this type of crime, seeking and arresting not only opportunists who happen upon sleeping passengers that fail to conceal their property, but also career criminals who actively search for victims and remove their property with the assistance of razor blades. In one such arrest, on June 20th, police officers Louis Yearwood and Martin Wicklow of Transit District 20 observed a 34-year-old man named Kareem Daniels walking on and off stationary trains inside the Main Street 7 line terminal station at approximately 3 a.m. The officers witnessed Daniels sit next to a sleeping passenger on one of these trains, and then moments later walk off the train. When the officers approached the sleeping passenger, they noticed that he was still asleep with his pants pocket cut. They also observed a pair of headphones dangling from his head that was disconnected from any electronic device. After stopping Kareem Daniels and conducting a further investigation, they arrested him and recovered the victim's iPhone along with 2 razor blades. I thank Mr. Joe Loda, Tom Prendergast, Carmen Bianco, and the members of this committee for your continued support, and I welcome any questions or suggestions you may have.
Questions for Chief Fox? Alan?
Chief Fox.
Yes, sir.
Several months ago, I raised the issue of the district attorneys providing orders of protection as part of any disposition, either convictions or plea bargains that took place for people who were preying on our passengers and on our employees down in the system. Has there been any movement towards that? I know that there were some people who were suggesting it would be difficult to enforce, but in fact, as you have stated, we know who many of these people are, and we're waiting for them to commit crimes. So they could be arrested simply for being down on the subway, after judges issued such an order. So I was wondering, what the situation was.
We actually have the parole stipulation program, where in some cases with an individual, as you described, somebody persistent transit crime, somebody who persistently commits transit crimes, there's a stipulation on their parole that they're not allowed to enter the subway system, and all officers that's communicated who they are, and we've actually been able to initiate a procedure that's violated the parole of a couple of individuals since 2011 through 2012. We also have the transit recidivist program, which isn't, as you described, a clear order of protection, but it is it's known when an officer encounters somebody in an enforcement situation whether or not that person's a recidivist.
Okay, but if an order of protection were issued, they'd be in contempt of court. They'd be subject to a year in jail for violating the judge's order. And so I think it behooves us to try to push the district attorneys, particularly for these people who are, that this is their occupation.
I see the merits of your suggestion. It's an order of protection in such cases. Obviously, it's worth exploring, but I'm not sure that that's as applicable as the typical methods of using orders of protections usually has to do with individual on individual. But I'll certainly give it more consideration.
I mean, they issue them for shopping malls and banning people from going into shopping centers. So,
Alan, I'll work with the 5 district. I'll take it upon myself. I'll work with the 5 district attorneys. I'd like to also work with you on this, since I know you know many of them, so that they can move in this direction. They have moved tremendously in the direction of dealing with various different types of violence and assault against our workers. This is just a natural extension of what the 5 district attorneys have already started, so I'll make sure that happens.
And Mr. Loader, if I may add, we too get excellent cooperation from each of the district attorneys.
Let me just first ask, on the 108 new officers, are they replacing existing officers who have retired or been moved on, or are these additions to the force?
Well, these are additions, but retiring and transfers is just the nature of the business. Attrition always happens. Just
so how much attrition has happened during this period?
Well,
excuse me, just a question, Chuck. Are you talking about NYPD wide or just the Transit Bureau?
Transit Bureau.
Well, the Transit Bureau, we have an additional this date today compared to last year. This 108 brings us up 6% number of officers.
Brings us up
to an increase of 6%.
6%. Let me see if we can agree on something. The statistics this year as compared with last year are an increase of over 15% in the major felonies area. And we are now doing worse than we did in 2006 and on our way to 2005 statistics. I assume that in addition to the numbers that are reported, there are an undefined number of additional instances where people just don't report the theft of the iPod or the iPhone or what have you, and so that number may be increased. My question is not directed to your enforcement, which I believe has been stellar in every way. My question is the extent to which the prosecuting entities and the courts understand that this is something that just cannot be permitted to continue, of month after month, year after year, increases in the crimes in this area. I will tell you, I've spoken to the district attorney in Manhattan, and he is aware of the problem, and he's trying to focus on it as best he can. But you still need 2 to tango, the prosecutor and the courts. It seems to me we ought to get some statistics from some source that shows what happens when a person is arrested, how many of them are out on parole and shouldn't even be out on parole, but should be in the slammer for a long stretch of time, and what the courts do and what the prosecutors do. Because plea bargaining, coupled with leniency, just puts them back out to do their own mischief all over again.
Mr. Muldred, as you open your comments with crime, I believe, getting worse, it's actually the increase with these new steps that we've taken is that the decrease that we've had in the last 28 days is actually brought, for example, that year-to-date increase that's in the book up and through June, 15.5%, down to 13.6. And if you remember,
Still an increase.
And if you remember, we were much higher in January and February. And also, as I had mentioned, this electronics being a target, it's a new phenomenon, and consistently over the last 3 years, the percentage of our crime where electronics are the target, where people feel safe, very, very safe, particularly in our subway system, on their laptops and phones and with these expensive headphones, has actually increased. Where I believe last year it was 34% of our crime for the whole year, and now it's electronic targeted theft is 47% of all our crimes. So a lot has to do with community notice, awareness, and crime prevention tips, as well as enforcement.
But Joe, my point is, and I know Chairman Loader has been in constant contact with the district attorney. My point is, we need to get some statistics from them and from OCA that tells us what the courts are doing and what the district attorneys are doing after you make these arrests and after these bums get before the court. You need every element of law enforcement to function in tandem in order to help deal with these crimes.
Okay, any further questions for either Chuck Merdler or Joe Fox. Back to you, Tom.
Yes, I want to have Vinny DiMarino, Vice President of Security, talk for just a few minutes. There have been the subject of fare evasion has come up a couple of times in the past few months. By our own numbers, on the subway side, we're about 1.5% fare evasion. On the bus side, a little over 10%, and that varies by borough and by route across the city. When we compare ourselves against the best in class, we're in the upper half for sure on the subway side, and we're in the lower half on the bus side. There is no system. There's no system in the world that has 0% fare evasion. The ranges that we say possibly are between $50 and $100 million. The board has been concerned about that. New York City Police has the Transit Bureau has primary responsibility for fare evasion, along with us in the subway. New York City Police at a precinct level on the bus side. What we're going to do in terms of the Eagle team is expand that a little bit to try to complement and supplement what New York City Police does. And I'll let Vinny talk about that for just a few minutes.
Thank you. I am Vincent DiMarino, the Vice President of Security here in New York City Transit. Good morning. Recent reports indicate that fare evasion, particularly bus fare evasion in New York City Transit, is on the rise. In fact, fare evasion, particularly bus fare evasion, is pervasive in many public transit systems throughout the country and around the world. Worldwide estimates conservatively place annual revenues lost in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and as was mentioned, here in New York City Transit alone, it may be somewhere between $50 and $100 million. As disturbing as that might be, it's more than just revenues lost. When people get a sense that no one is in control, that no one is in charge, people may do one of two things. They may decide to abandon the buses altogether out of fear, perception, not really reality, but they may abandon using the buses, ridership might go down, or they may choose to beat the fare themselves. They get tired of, in their perception, and MI being the only person who's paying. So if everyone else is doing it and everyone else is getting away with it, why shouldn't I too? All right, so what can we do about it? As the President mentioned, the NYPD has primary responsibility for crime on buses, and that includes fare evasion, and they've been doing an outstanding job. You may have read in recent weeks that they've really stepped up their plainclothes and uniform presence on buses, and that has really helped us a lot. The ancillary benefits include not just lower fare evasion, increased ridership, increased revenue, but more importantly, crime goes down on those buses and bus operator assaults go down too. And that's very important. As you know, in this organization, finding a way to prevent our employees from being assaulted is of primary concern. What we're looking to do here in the MTA New York City Transit is simply assist the NYPD in their efforts, as was mentioned, enhance the Eagle team, which now does fare inspection and fare enforcement on the SBS routes. Our objectives are to create a collaborative and cooperative strategies and tactics with the NYPD. We'll figure out where the hotspots are. We will do CompStat-like analysis, world-renowned CompStat-like analysis of the hotspots, where the fare evasion is, just like we're trying to do now with our crime and our bus operator assaults, and we will work together and partner with the NYPD to assist them in this effort. My Eagle team will be expanded, and we'll have folks out there targeting those hotspots. The goal is to get people to learn, not to catch people not paying. More importantly, the goal is to get people to understand through public awareness increases, behavior modification, and enforcement when needed, but to get people to understand that this is not a free service, that they must pay.
Questions for Chief of Security DiMartino. Andrew.
Vinny, thanks for your report.
I misidentified the defendant again.
I think you may be underestimating the fare evasion in the subways. I see 2 or 3 virtually every day. I've seen something I haven't seen in years, which I didn't think you could do with these kinds of turnstiles. I've started to see backcocking. I've seen some athletic moves. I've seen going through the slam gates, and of course, without anybody there to, and of course, all they could do before was yell, pay your fare, but you don't even have that anymore. So my question is, are plainclothes officers out watching various non-personnel equipped entrances and exits? Why are we broadcasting that the slam gates are open if there's no agent there to hear the alarms? which just notifies people you can come in now, you know, with the alarm when somebody goes out legitimately out of one of the slam gates because they have a wagon or whatever. I mean, why are we doing things like that? Why are we advertising the gates are open now? Come on in.
Yeah, I can't answer to what the Transit Bureau is doing. I'm relatively familiar with all their great work. But in my opinion, the NYPD has done nothing short of outstanding work in crime reduction in the subway. When you look at the ridership increases and the amount of crime, it's so minuscule.
No, I'm not diminishing that in any way. But as we know from the bad old days, when people beat the fare, sometimes they do worse things once they're in the system. So what are we doing to stop advertising that the slam gates are open with an alarm that nobody's there to hear except a perpetrator, for instance? Why are we, why don't we have cameras in places that we should, and why aren't they watched in real time? Maybe you'll stop something worse than a fare evasion. Maybe you'll stop, a terrorist act. Who knows?
That's a separate issue, and we can cover that off. There's been an awful lot of dialogue on the issue of what are the pros and cons of having an alarm on that slam gate, and we have revisited a number of times, and we can do it again. Okay. Alan?
Yes. I mean, some of those moves that Andrew described must be from his Worldwide Wrestling Federation days, but kind of new to me. But getting back to the buses.
You never saw somebody jump?
The buses, you had talked about ComStat-like statistics.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I was wondering if it would be possible, and Darrell, this is probably a question for you and Tom as much as it is for you, sir. Can we do a monthly reporting on fare evasion, just like we do with on-time performance and revenue as part of the bus operations?
We'll take
reports.
We'll take a look at how often we can actually report on it, because in some of our own measures, I believe we do it quarterly. We don't do it monthly, so it would be it'd make more sense to look maybe quarterly or biannually. But we can certainly look at the issue, because a measure tracked is a measure normally that you see improvement in. So I understand the logic.
Yes.
We'll take a look at it.
And this way we have information to give to the police department. And I don't think
and one of the advantages I want to underscore of Vinny's group and the Eagle team is it's a very close relationship with buses in terms of trying to target the high-profile routes where these abuses are occurring and then help provide that information to New York City Police. Then they have a leg up in terms of where to deploy resources. I want to overemphasize the fact that there's a coordinated effort here between buses, security, and New York City Police.
Yeah, just one more on that issue. It's my understanding that, and I know that Joe has been talking to Commissioner Kelly about this extensively, and to the DAs and so forth, but that in addition to talking to them, I understand that part of this investment plan provides actual money, so we're putting our money into investments into this effort, and I don't think that that's really gotten a lot of attention in the service restoration avalanche news that we are affirmatively, as part of this package, committing resources to stem the tide, and hopefully that will produce more revenues that we can reinvest in our service.
Well, the addition of personnel for the Eagle teams in the way of supervision and direct employees requires money, so that's an investment of resources.
Yes, but I don't think that's been emphasized enough.
And it'll be brought up at Wednesday's board meeting.
Thank you.
All right, on to finance. Are we, anybody else? Chuck?
Just one more thought. And I advance this in the hope that perhaps the chairman can raise it with OCA, Office of Court Administration or otherwise. Experience has shown that where, for example, a housing part was established for housing violations, with a consistent judicial manning that understood who the recidivists were, what the problems are and the like, it was effective. The same thing has happened in the drug parts and the like. And it seems to me that part of this team, it's not just the prosecutor and the cop, but it is also the judiciary has to pay and make sure that it does its part of it. And the idea that I would advance is the following. Why not have a transit part where we all know who those folks are, where the judge or judges assigned to that part can deal with them, so you don't have to have the kind of protective orders, but people are sent away when they do this sort of stuff, and to stop the recidivism. I can tell you from experience, direct experience, that kind of thing is effective.
Are you running for district attorney at the Bronx?
Did that once, didn't like it.
All right. On to finance, are we making, well, we don't make money in transit speak. Are we losing less money than we were before?
We're doing fairly well. Before we begin our discussion on May's financial and ridership report, I would like to inform the New York City Transit Committee members that we are proposing a change to the narrative section of the report as proposed in your book. The purpose is to provide greater clarity without changing the basic information provided in the overall report. To assist you in understanding the new report format, we've included a summary at the end of the financial and ridership report this month that details the changes and enables you to compare the affected sections of the current report format to the newly proposed format, and using the sample from the July 2011 information. Please let us know if you have any comments regarding this proposal, just in the interest of making sure that you know we've made a change. Preliminary May 2012 fare box revenue was $321.2 million, or $1.4 million above budget. Year-to-date fare box revenue was $1.528 billion, $2.3 million above budget. The average non-student fare in May 2012 was $1.63. Preliminary May 2012 operating expenses before depreciation exceeded budget by $11 million, or 2.2%. Labor expenses were higher than budget by $22.8 million, due mainly to higher health and welfare expenses, mostly from increased claims activity and the unfavorable timing of expenses and higher payroll expenses, due largely to the recent ATU arbitration ruling, which included an increase of 2.88% in the third year of the contract versus a zero budget assumption. Non-labor expenses were below budget by $11.8 million, or 8.6%, including the favorable timing of several expenses and paratransit insurance underruns. Year-to-date operating expenses were $4.2 million, or 0.2% below budget, and labor expenses were higher than budget by $46.3 million, due mostly to overtime requirements, higher health and welfare claims activity, and the impact of that ATU arbitration ruling. Non-labor expenses were less than budget by $50.6 million, or 7.3%, due again to the timing of several expenses and paratransit insurance underruns. May 2012 ridership totaled $209.6 million, or 0.2% above budget. Year-to-date ridership was $988.2 million, 0.3% above budget. May 2012 average weekday ridership was 5.6 million, an increase of some almost 2% from May 2011. The average weekday local bus ridership was 2.2 million, a decrease of 0.9% from May 2011. Average weekday express bus ridership was 44,000 customers, an increase of 3.3% from May of 2011. May 2012 average weekday paratransit ridership was 32,000, an increase of 6.5% from the May of previous year. An early look at preliminary June results indicate total fare box revenue was $1.6 million above budget, and preliminary June 2012 operating expenses were unfavorable to budget by $92.8 million, due primarily to NYCER's fiscal year timing adjustments. That's the pension system, originally planned for July. The final June of 2012 financial and ridership report will be presented at the September 2012 committee meeting, with the results to be compared to the mid-year forecast.
Questions on finance? On to Fred Smith.
Good morning. Looking to capital program results, commitments for the month of May totaled $32.3 million, including the following major efforts: the purchase and installation of security equipment for New York City Transit's existing and new fiber optic Internet Protocol enterprise network, construction of a new consolidated employee facility on the mezzanine level at 207th Street on the 8th Avenue line in Manhattan, 2 mainline track replacement projects as part of the 2012 annual track and switch reconstruction program, and installation of equipment to strengthen security and surveillance at various master tower locations through the subway network. Meanwhile, in May, substantial completions totaled $206.7 million. Station rehab work and ADA upgrades and employee facilities rehab, all at the East 180th Street station on the White Plains Road line, serving the 2 and 5.
You guys only working in the Bronx?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Major effort. The rehab of the Beach 90th, 98th, and 105th Street stations, that's on the Rockaway line in Brooklyn. Roof repair and replacement projects to address 8 facilities within the Department of Subways. And the upgrade of 6.2 miles of tunnel lining on the F&G service on the Culver line in Brooklyn. And an American Recovery and Reinvestment Act also known as stimulus project, funded project, to upgrade perimeter fencing, protecting various New York City train storage yards at 5 locations throughout the system. That completes my report.
Questions? All right, on to Steve and procurements.
Good morning.
Where is he? Oh,
The
there you are. Okay.
The procurement package this month, which presents both New York City Transit and MTACC procurements, includes 13 actions totaling $297.1 million in expenditures.
Questions?
I'd like to move.
Second.
I'd like to focus on 3 questions, if I may. The procurement involving SafeTech, I don't understand, if you will look at the final paragraph. However, the second firm took exception to numerous contract provisions which it had not previously submitted. Were these exceptions by them or what?
Yes.
They pulled out.
The exceptions were by them. It was a delayed submission of their exceptions to the terms and conditions, and they were plentiful.
Secondly, if I read correctly, and I may not, on page 6.14, we have the procurement bearing distributors. If I'm reading this correctly, it seems to suggest that email or e-bidding is not particularly helpful.
Well, in this particular circumstance, it did not yield the savings that we had envisioned. As a matter of fact, once we conducted the e-procurement, because the pricing came in a bit higher than what we had anticipated, and we looked at our PPI, Producer Price Index, what we expected to pay, we conducted a survey, and the bidders indicated that we were paying a premium. So in this particular instance, we went back to a more traditional approach and didn't use the e-procurement. That's what you've got in front of you.
At the end of the day, all we got was a couple of bucks, $18,000 off. Is that right?
That's correct.
Turning to the Optum, have there been any communications with the union before extending this contract? I would not like us to see us in a position where we have another arbitration asserted for diminution of services.
This contract was originally competitively bid a few years ago, and we didn't have any problems with the union on this. This is extending the same contract.
I would strongly recommend to you that you communicate. Pardon me? All right. The final one is, if you will look at the Henry Brothers one, there's got to be something wrong here. When they bid $2.3 million, you estimate the cost is $1.4 million, and they lower their bid by about $1 million. Are those numbers hokey, or what's going on here?
No. There was a significant amount of scope negotiation and discussions, some clarification, and that number was their initial offering. You'll notice through a lot of the AWOs and change orders, we do see significant drops in the pricing from the initial offering to ultimately what we pay. And some of it has to do with just clarifying the scope, phasing the project, and just approaching, and maybe a different explanation in terms of how some of the work may be approached.
Lastly, if I may, on the Clowder contract, that was started in the year 2000 with no bidding, the sole source then. It's continued as sole source in one form or another, and now what we're being asked to do is to sole source it to Clowder for a period of 10 years from the time, more than 10 years, from the time that it originally got the sole source. Isn't there anyone who can compete? Is there nobody else in the business?
Yes. As a matter of fact, there are others, and we're aggressively pursuing additional firms to compete. But in this particular instance, Clowder was recommended to the board 3 years ago in July in 2009 as a sole source because of their unique qualifications relative to the R188 contract, which is the contract that they will be overseeing here. That contract involves not only the new build of cars that need to be compatible with existing R142A cars, which LTK oversaw the design and manufacture of a number of years ago, but also a significant amount of conversion work So they are uniquely qualified for this particular work. But in new work, we are aggressively pursuing pulling in additional consultants.
Stephen, what I'm concerned about is 19 years of sole source for one supplier, for one vendor, and we're being asked today as part of that to give them another 4 or 5 years. It seems to me that we ought not to do it for that long.
But if I may, this particular procurement that was brought to the board back 3 years ago was it was in 2 phases. It was an initial phase for a small portion of the initial design for 23 new cars and the conversion of 10. There was an option in that original presentation to the board. We're only exercising the option which was in the original contract here.
Still 19 years. Forgive me, but I have a big problem with sole source. Bidding was enacted by the legislature for a purpose.
We are aggressively letting the rest of the engineering services community know. There are about 4 or 5 players. LTK has been a long-running supplier to most of the MTA agencies, if not all, the rail agencies, that we want bidders and we want competition. And in a procurement that we have out, if it's not on the street, it's close to going on the street.
It is. It's out.
We have made sure that that message has been communicated from Steve as well as myself.
Wait, Mr. Chairman, just if I may ask a couple questions. So the Clouder, the additional 6 years, does that match up with the term, the consulting services match up with the term of the contract?
The underlying contract, yes.
So that's why it's 6 years?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's a logic to that.
Absolutely.
So anything shorter would be illogical. So
yes, exactly.
They're inefficient.
In large part, they oversee not only the design, but also the manufacturing and conversion of these cars, along with our staff.
All right. Well, I also share the concern whenever I see percent of modification in the several hundreds % of the original contract. I think that's a concern we all share, but I understand the logic behind that. Thank you. Then on the Tioco, it's a non-competitive. It's a non-competitive contract, and in the paragraph it says software maintenance costs to monitor a network of this significance are within the market range of fair and reasonableness. So if there's no competitive process, how do we conclude that it's fair and reasonable?
Well, there's a number of ways that we look at it. We have independent estimates that are developed, and we also have, we utilize companies like Gartner to tell us what we should be paying. In other words, the relationship between initial acquisition and maintenance costs for particularly complex software systems. And when we say that, we talk about ranges somewhere in the neighborhood of between 12 and 20-something % of the original acquisition. And that, when we say it falls within that range, these annual maintenance costs fall within that particular area.
And there was no way to do any other competitive for this particular?
This company owns the software. What we did is we removed the company, Siemens, and the other companies that we originally had contractual privity with, and we went to the party that actually developed the software. So we've eliminated one layer there. But this particular company, again, is uniquely qualified because they own the rights, and in this particular area, they're expert with regard to maintenance. And this is a critical system.
Anyone else?
I have one more. I'm
okay.
just trying to do them. Thank you. Thanks for having me to your committee.
It's a
trying to
delight
make
have
use
you here.
of the time.
We permit non-committee members to ask questions in a reasonable amount.
All right. I won't use up my welcome then. I'll skip a couple of the ones that were iffy. Placer, I think you discussed. I have one. I'll skip that and ask later. I do have one question on the if there's a broader conclusion we should draw with respect to the e-procurement. And I don't know who would address that.
I would. Again, we're not going to abandon e-procurements across the board. Traditionally, we have a very good track record of competitively bidding our maintenance parts. I think just in this particular instance, and again, if you recall, the e-procurement is on a pilot. We're testing it. So in this particular market, in this particular area, we're finding that the pricing through a more traditional competitive bid is yielding better pricing. That doesn't mean that we're not going to use or pursue e-procurements in other fronts, maybe like services or items or areas where we usually do negotiated procurements. Just in this particular instance and in a few others, we found that the normal traditional competitive bidding process that we use, which is very formal, is yielding better pricing than the e-procurement.
All right, I think that's great that you were making that comparison and that you were you caught the instance, at least in this case, where the e-procurement didn't work. Thank you.
Is there a reason that the e-procurement did not achieve optimal results here?
Yes, I think it's because they're paying, the way it's set up, the bidders who, again, we have robust competition in this area, are paying a premium to participate. That's part of the e-procurement. In other words, the cost to play. It's about 1.5 points in term on their bid. The winner would have to pay about 1.5 points on top of their bid price. And those folks indicated that that's the type of margin plus that we're paying for this. So we just looked at it more traditionally and said, there's a way to save. You're right, it's not a whole lot of money, but every dollar counts, and we focused here on saving that money.
What we have found with e-procurement, especially when it's a commodity, this wasn't a commodity situation.
No,
it was highly specialized. But you know, when you're looking at things that are uniform, purchased by a transit system or a law firm or a hospital or anything like that, e-procurement has been showing 17 to 20% savings because of the competitive marketplace. It actually makes it a much more efficient market by having everybody in there seeing what everybody's bidding and watch it bid down.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I have no. I think it's a wonderful idea to move to e-procurement. My question is, if the additional fee is a deterrent, is there some way that we can deal with that issue going forward, or was it just a problem in this instance as compared with some of the others?
That's why we're doing the pilot program, to try and run it through this process to see, to actually look at the results and then make those type of determinations. Certainly in this particular case, we felt we were paying a premium, and it showed when we did the survey that we were.
All right, any further questions or discussions? The July procurement package has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it carries. Action items, Tom?
There's just an AFC report in the book that we normally give. We don't make a presentation. That's the end for the New York City Transit Committee. Oh, I'm sorry. Action items.
Action items. Staff summary.
First is a request modification of the scope for the 4th Avenue Structure Rehabilitation Project. This scope change will allow us to address specific higher priority defective components at more locations in a timely manner. And the second request is for the renewal of the retainer agreements with the Transit Adjudication Bureau's current senior hearing officers.
Okay, we need senior hearing officers. Any questions on the action items? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is carried. Now, we now turn to the Capital, Dr. H., Chairman of this one, Capital Construction, Michael Haradnachu.
Aye.
Where are you?
Aye.
Again?
Again, you left out samples.
Okay. I'm going to focus today my presentation on 2nd Avenue. There's some interesting stuff that's happening there, so I would like to address that. At the upper portion of 2nd Avenue and 96th Street Station, where we are about to complete all our work regarding slurry walls and secant piles, we had something quite unusual, and I thought to share it with you. We had divers having to work there due to the fact that one of the slurry wall panels that were used to stop the next pour just got stuck, and we couldn't pull it out. And in order to do that, we needed to, in effect, employ divers that had to go under, and this is we had 5 divers actually doing that. I don't have the pictures below because the divers see absolutely nothing, and this is they only work by touch, and they had to, in effect, and This is another diver, and then the fifth diver coming out is the guy that actually was successful to cut the caisson, and they used torches to do so. In effect, what we did, we were able to lift that out. And this is, by the way, this is not part of the building. It looks like that, but it is not. And we were able to pull this out. It's a pretty significant piece of steel that we pulled out. And then you'll see exactly where it was actually cut. And that enabled us to, in effect, complete that particular slurry panel. The next. One of the things that are important here, and this is not a missile silo, but this is our slurry operation, is going to be removed. We are about to finish all our slurry work, and this is actually going to be removed. And eventually, when we're done, it's still going to be occupied by some construction, but when we're done, this is going to go back to being a park that was before we got there. This is another area that we have done all of the rebar assembly. Remember that the cages that we're lowering down, they were somewhere between 100 and 120 feet, and that's going to disappear as well. So we are kind of returning some of the roadway to its intended use. I would like to touch upon the 72nd Street Station area, and I just specifically have identified the underground cavern as well as the four locations where we are doing blasting. The underground cavern is about 98% complete. We still have some small amount of blasting needs to get done around the 69th Street area where we actually have the last piece where we are hauling muck from below. And that will be done at the beginning of August. It will be finished. And then we have a number of other locations. I'm going to go to entrance number 1 at 69th, and that has been completed. The next area that we are dealing with is go to entrance number 3. Let's stay on the east side. This is an area where we expect to install 5 elevators. This is the main entry at this location. You can see the area where we had the building. As usual, we acquired only buildings that normally houses pizzerias. This was, I think, Manhattan Pizza. We took it down, and right now we are at the point where we are, in effect, ready to move on. Can we go on? Okay. By October 2012, we're going to be done with. Excuse me.
5 elevators?
Yes, 5 elevators. Yes. Okay. By October 2012, all the blasting will be done at that particular location. We'll start the blasting actually on the 24th. I'm sorry. By tomorrow, we start blasting there. Go please to ancillary to entrance 2. This is at the northwest corner of 72nd Street. In total, we're going to need to go down and go down 90 feet down. At this point, we have been able to blast 29 out of the 90 feet, so we have another 61 feet to go. By the time we're going to be done, that's going to take longer, and it will be done by February 2013. And then, last but not least, ancillary 1. Again, this is going to be slightly deeper. It goes about 100 feet, and we have done 35% of it, so we have another 65 feet to go. And then we're going to be done with that. Okay. I think that that completes the report on 72nd. I would say that number 7 as well as the Fulton Street are on schedule and on budget, so there's nothing special to report at this time.
Questions for Capital, Dr. H. Well done.
I have a question on these elevators. Is it possible to have elevators that go all the way, or do you have to go to the mezzanine and then down again?
That go to the mezzanine and go down again.
You can't do it all the way? Even with the modern fare collection cards and all that?
I think that was the design that was developed. Right now, changes to that are basically not realistic.
Michael, is that because once you reach the mezzanine level, you can go either direction?
Yes. You
so
reach
that
the mezzanine.
both sides of a street give you access to the mezzanine, so you could access either direction of travel.
That's correct.
That's the advantage to the mezzanine way
That's
of doing
correct.
things.
Because we are talking about the central platform here.
Yeah.
So
You've still got two elevators down below.
no, but they go to the
If you just
from
had
the
two elevators
platform.
on either side going all the way, you wouldn't have to go to the mezzanine at all. I mean, it could
Well,
stop.
we don't have. We have only on one side.
It could stop at the mezzanine. It could have a stop at the
Yeah,
mezzanine.
we only have it on one side, though.
Well, okay. I just think 'cause it seems a
And
waste.
this was a lot of iterations here. We had issues with where to locate entry points.
Is
how
this an
to-
island platform, Michael?
Yes. it
Well,
is.
then you couldn't come straight down from the middle of the street, because the island
No,
platform will
the
be in the
only
middle of
way-
the street, middle of the right-of-way, so you're going to have to come down to a mezzanine anyway.
Any more questions for Capital Dr. H? If not, anything more on transit? If not, we're about ready to turn over to you, Darrell. You ready? Absolutely. Okay, don't move. We're going to go to right to bus operations.
No, I'm fine. I'm comfortable.
I'm just going to go ahead and read the operations report, okay? Yep. The performance highlights for the month of May 2012 and the past 12 months are on pages 18 and 19 of the committee book. I'll start with fleet reliability for the month of May. The combined bus MDBF was 4,399 miles, 37.6% greater than compared to May 2011 levels. When looking at our performance over a rolling 12-month period, the combined MDBF was 3756. This is an improvement of 9.7% when compared to the prior 12-month period. These results are the product of our performance-based maintenance program implemented late last year. We previously shared these efforts and that they have placed us in a good position as we entered into the summer season. And in fact, they have. For the month of June, as well as July and year-to-date, we've averaged a 35% improvement over last year. This while enduring 4 heat waves. Next, I'll talk about our service indicators for the month of May. The percent of scheduled pullouts for AM and PM peak periods were 99.1% and 99.5% respectively. The percent of trips completed was 98.7 improvements of 0.5 to 1%. When looking at our performance over a rolling 12-month period, AM and PM pullouts were 98.9% and 99.3% respectively. Slight improvements of 0.2% in each indicator. The percent of completed trips were 98.3%, an improvement of 0.5%. That completes the operation report. Are there any questions? With that, I'll move to Steve Vidal to give the quick safety report.
Thank you, Darrell. Our comments on May's customer and employee safety performance can be found on page 20 in the book. On a regional basis, the 12-month rate for combined bus collisions per million miles traveled across the 2 bus units is 6.1% lower in the right direction than it was in the prior 12-month period. The collision injury rate for the month at MTA Bus is up from the 2011 because of the unusually low number of collision injuries claimed a year ago in May, offsetting a 15.7% improvement in this area for New York City Transit Bus. As we reported at June's meeting, both customer accidents and customer accident injury indicators were identified as an area of concern. In response to this, we continue to monitor performance closely while also maintaining our focus on our basics, or Bus Accident Safety Improvement Coordination System program. This joint initiative involving depot and road control management reinforces basic safety and customer service skills while interacting with bus operators and passenger service. The program was implemented in mid-March and is starting to show the desired results. While May data continue to trend in an undesirable direction, a review of the preliminary June data is indicating that customer accident performance improved in June by over 6% and is showing an overall improvement in customer accident injuries by 17%. We anticipate ongoing benefits from this performance improvement initiative and customer awareness measures and will continue to update the committee on its progress. Finally, the 12-month average rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents is 2.6% higher on a regional basis, and this represents a marginally improved performance level overall on a regional 12-month rolling average. The entire month increase in May represents an additional 11 employee injuries reported in New York City Transit. To address performance in this area, we implemented an oversight working group focusing on mitigating the occurrences of injuries through increased safety awareness campaigns, as well as continuing our focus on the root cause of incidents that had occurred. As a result, a review of the June data is indicating that we will have an improved mid-year position compared to 2011. We'll continue to closely monitor our performance in this area. This concludes the safety report. Are there any questions? I'd like to introduce Tom Charles for a paratransit report.
Thank you, Steve. The paratransit report is on page 22. For the month of May 2012, accessorized paratransit ridership was up 9.3% compared to May 2011 levels. 12-month ridership levels were up by 3.6% in accessorized. Over the 12-month period ending May 2012, there was a 1.4% decrease in the monthly average of accessorized requests for service. The favorable no-show trend continued in the month of May as accessorized passenger no-shows declined by 25.7% when compared to May 2011. In anticipation of New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission's launch of an improved accessible taxi dispatch system, we identified approximately 1,300 accessorized wheelchair users who travel within Manhattan and asked them to participate in the prepaid debit card test and evaluation. The initial response is very low and represents a concern from customers on the reliability and availability of accessible taxis. However, as with other initiatives, we will take the time and effort to promote this program so as to achieve an increase in participation from our customer base. This completes the paratransit report. Are there any questions? About 7 people. That's low. Well, we'll keep it. It generally starts this way most of the time.
Any further questions? No. Now for Tom Del Solvo with the ridership, financial, and the procurement sections.
Okay. The May ridership report is shown on page 21 of the committee book. For the month of May 2012, overall average weekday ridership decreased by 0.7 when compared to May 2011. MTA bus average weekday ridership dropped by 0.5% in May 2012, and New York City Transit bus decreased by 0.8% for the same period. Average weekend ridership was unchanged at New York City Transit bus and increased at MTA bus by 3.4%, resulting in an overall combined ridership increase on the weekends of 0.6%. Express bus ridership on weekdays increased at New York City Transit by 3.3% in May and rose 0.2 in MTA bus, resulting in an overall combined improvement of 1.9%. Preliminary ridership data for June 2012 indicates that levels declined when compared to actual 2011 June data. Average weekday ridership for MTA bus declined slightly by 0.2% from last year, while New York City Transit bus ridership declined by 1.4% in June. Moving on to the revenue and expense report that's summarized on page 23. Year-to-date May 2012 fare box revenues for fixed route services are lower than budget for New York City Transit by 0.6%, but better than budget in MTA bus by 2.1%. Overall, fare box revenues are $700,000 or 0.2 slightly lower than budget through May 2012. Now, on the expense side, combined May 2012 year-to-date non-reimbursable accrued expenses for bus operations reflects an overall favorable variance of $45.9 million, or 4%.
New York City Transit Bus is favorable to budget levels by $49.1 million and is slightly offset by MTA Bus, which is over budget by $3.2 million. The performance against budget represents a combination of favorable non-labor expenses of $41 million and favorable labor expenses of $4.5 million. The non-labor variance is due to the use of lower-cost taxis and vouchers for paratransit contracts, favorable fuel costs, the timing of maintenance and other operating contracts, lower paratransit insurance costs, and the timing of maintenance material usage. On the labor side, the favorable variance results from the timing of fringe benefit expenses and is offset partially by the bus maintenance program overtime expenses. That's it for the finance and ridership reports. Any questions?
Are there any questions? No.
I'll move on to procurements. Okay, we have 4 procurement actions this month totaling $41.3 million. There are 2 non-competitive, 1 competitive, and 1 ratification shown in the book beginning on page 45. We're going to highlight the 2 paratransit procurements. The first procurement is a budget adjustment to a contract with Corporate Transportation Group in the amount of $32.7 million. This budget adjustment will add additional funding to provide continued broker-based car services for paratransit Successor Ride customers through the end of the contract term, January 12, 2013. The contract is a 2-year test and evaluation pilot initiative that utilizes a single contractor to schedule and dispatch prearranged trips for paratransit's ambulatory passengers through a non-dedicated subcontractor network of livery and black car service providers. The purpose of the initiative was to test and evaluate the concept that the broker model could provide the vehicle capacity to perform a high volume of trips without compromising the quality of service. The pilot initiative has shown to date that the broker model is a viable transportation mode, as CTG has provided the vehicle capacity for an accelerated ramp-up of trips. The main reason for adjusting the budget are to cover the shortfall in funding that resulted from the accelerated ramp-up of service, provide funding for the projected increase in trip volume, and create the opportunity for additional cost savings through the end of the contract term. The use of a non-dedicated service provides a direct cost benefit to New York City Transit in that paratransit does not bear the direct responsibility for maintenance and operating costs, as is the case with dedicated primary service for paratransit. The initiative offers pricing that's on average 39% lower than the current average cost per trip of $53 for dedicated primary service. The current average cost per trip for broker service is $32 per trip. The other highlighted procurement action this month is for First Transit in the amount of $8.4 million. This modification will extend the contract for up to an additional 4 months from December 1st, 2012 through March 31st, 2013. First Transit provides the necessary staff to operate an ADA paratransit call center that includes processing trip requests through advanced reservations, addressing same-day service delivery issues, assisting with development and issuance of daily paratransit schedules, and providing customer information on trip status to paratransit registrants on a 24-hour basis. It was believed that the 2 most recent modifications, which provided coverage through November 2012, would have afforded sufficient time to solicit and review new proposals for the replacement contract, including a cost reduction initiative, and included the possibility of relocating the call center from its current location in Long Island City to an off-site location. However, the research involved with potentially implementing an off-site facility resulted in extended negotiations and the need to request interim proposals before requesting best and final offers in order to achieve the best value for transit.
Tom, excuse me, does off-site mean out of New York State? Just somewhere else other than Long Island City?
It could mean out of New York State, but right now we're not sure, and I have to be honest, I can't discuss it as we currently have a procurement underway.
It could mean, Andrew, in New York City, in New York State, or out of New York State. The timing of requesting BAFOs, or best and final offers, effectively pushes the anticipated board action to a future date and left insufficient startup time, only 60 days, as 90 days is the minimum that required startup time for most proposers, whether it's on-site or off-site. Therefore, additional time is required in order to complete the RFP. This mod would extend the contract for up to 4 months to March 31st, 2013. We're prepared to answer any questions on all 4 procurements.
Are there any questions?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrer.
Mr. Chairman, on a procurement that was not highlighted, it's a non-competitive procurement with respect to switching the engine technology from diesel to hybrid. I accept the rationale for it at face value for that change in engine technology. I'm just curious. It's one. I'm curious about your rationale for going non-competitive as opposed to competitive.
If I could, I'll attempt to answer the question. We're trying one. It's a pilot. It is to determine whether or not we can convert buses like this. So we're just going to try one. If in fact it works, we will, and we want to go forward, it will be done competitively. But this is just a unique. It's an experiment.
Okay.
I wouldn't even call it a pilot. It's an experiment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, even if this were a transit, a procurement package for $41.3 million would be thrown back until it got bigger because it was too small to consider. But since most of these things seem to be highly reasonable and cost savings, I'll move that they be adopted.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? There being none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There being none.
You're up.
Thank you, Darrell, and your team for this. Are there any other further questions? This will conclude our New York Bus Committee meeting. As we mentioned earlier, we don't have any meetings during the month of August. We'll see you all on September 24th at our next meeting. Thank you very much.